All right, what's good? So, media buying metrics. So, I've put together this document, and in it, I'm going to go through some metrics that I look for. Now, there's going to be some fluff, but it's pretty important fluff, okay? And I'm going to read through it. So, do excuse me reading the document. Not a big fan of that, reading the document word for word, and I'll probably go off on many different tangents. But the value in here should be enough that for us to take enough value away from it. Now, one thing I do want to point out is these are not set in stone. Okay, the metrics that I aim for are just benchmarks. They're just benchmarks for if I'm launching a new offer. This is ideally what I want to see. Okay, now if I don't see that, if it's lower or if it's not quite meeting the benchmarks, that's not the end of the world. But obviously, ideally this is where we want to be, just based off of experience of running offers, running ads. This is usually what we want to see when we go through the metrics, okay? But again, they change, right? So like the metrics would be completely different from offer to offer, from niche to niche, from vertical to vertical, right? If I'm running an offer in weight loss and I'm running an offer in ED, completely different metrics, completely different. Usually my weight loss CPMs are way higher, my CTRs are usually lower, whereas my ED CPMs are lower and CTRs higher. Okay, but the offer conversion rate's lower on the ED, offer conversion rate on the weight loss higher. Okay, so the metric's completely different. So there's no set rule. Like it's just like you just can't do it. You can't be like, okay, every ad you launch needs to be $30 CPM. It needs to be 5% click-through rate. It needs to be sub $1 CPC. It needs to be a landing page click-through rate of 50%. Like great benchmarks, but not always applicable and not realistic either. Okay, so again, remember, certain offers, certain niches have higher competition. Well, you're going to pay a higher CPM. Certain offers require different storytelling within the ad copy, potentially different visuals in the ad creative, different copy on the landing page, which could flag, a higher CPM. Okay, so, like with ED and men's health, sometimes you're using like attractive women, right? Now, usually that's going to get a higher CTR, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a higher conversion rate. In fact, it's usually a lower conversion rate. Again, I'm going to go through this, but don't get stuck in the mud on, oh, well, damn, this ad isn't getting me, a 5% click through rate. Shit, turn it off, move on to the next one. Like, at the end of the day, and I'm going to touch upon this, at the end of the day, in my opinion, there's really only one or two metrics that are, ultimately important. And that is, I say important, like ultimately what I'm looking at, right? That mean the most to me, and that's EPC and ROAS. Without those two, like obviously the secondary metrics like your click-through rate, your CPM, your landing page click-through rate, all of those good stuff are important, but they're not the ones that make the money. Like I've had ads before with super high CPMs, super low CTRs, but the most profitable. Okay, so we have to take that into account. Don't get stuck in the mud on this, all right? Like this is, you know, benchmarks, like I've said. So benchmarks is what we're using this for. It allows us when we're testing a new offer to see what is a good number to aim for. And if our ads fit in that sort of area, then great. Okay. But don't get like, oh, damn it, this is, this one's, $1.10 cost per click and I should be under $1. Don't worry, right? You're not too far away, right? And again, the idea is we want to give stuff enough time to spend as well, or enough spend to sort of actually get that data to make a decision whether it's turned off or not. Anyway, long way around getting into this document, but let's start with testing strategies. So I always like to test creatives first. It's just where I like to start. Again, it's not written in stone. You don't have to follow this same thing, but that's usually where I start because that's usually what I see has the biggest effect on moving the needle, okay? Is the creative. That has the biggest effect on the ROAS, on the EPCs, on the click-through rates, on everything, right? Is in my opinion and from my experience, the creative. So what I'll do is every time I test a new offer is I'm aiming to test 5 to 10 creatives with a new offer across different concepts and angles. So I've said this before, like usually I'll look to test maybe 3 different concepts. They could be, a podcast concept. They could be a UGC concept and maybe an image concept, right? And then usually I'll have 3 variations of that. And that would then give me 9 ads. Now you don't have to do that. You could test 2 concepts and, just do 2 or 3 variations of each to give you 5 or 6 ads, right? So again, like, just because I'm saying it, it doesn't mean it's like, oh, well, I have to do it this way. Like, it's whatever works for you. Okay, like you only want to run 3 ads, then that's fine as well. That's great. Like it's better than running 1 ad, and especially when budget's tight, like maybe 5 ads is either going to take too long to get the data, or it's going to mean that you have to spend too much to get the data. So then maybe 3 is the magic number where you're only testing 3 ads. It's not, there's nothing wrong with that. And in fairness, I've just launched a campaign an hour ago with 3 ads. So there we go. All right. So 5-10 creatives is where I usually like to start. For that reason, I want to allow a decent amount to test an offer. So testing structures I use sorry, let me explain this. For that reason, I want to allow a decent amount to test an offer. Right, so if I'm testing 10 ads or 10 creatives, then just testing $100 for the whole offer isn't going to be enough, right? Because if I'm running 10 ads and each ad spends $10 to give us our $100, it's not enough. Like, what if we were to spend another $10 on one of those ads and that $10 brought us free sales, but because we spent $10 across 10 ads and that was $100, we've turned everything off. Okay, so because I'm running 10 ads, or in this, example, I want to make sure I have enough budget to be able to, or at least, the testing budget to give enough to, allowance for each ad. And sometimes depending on how many ads I'm running, that'll be 1x target CPA. So if my target CPA is $100, then I'll give $100 for an ad. But also I'll play around with payouts as well. So if my payout is $100, or in that case, let's say it's $150, then maybe I'm playing around with that, right? I'll do that as the offer, and I'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so testing structures I use. So there are like 2 main testing structures, and I play around with this pretty much every week, just trying different things. But the 2 that I'm working the most with right now are this micro budget 111, which I posted a video about recently, which is basically 1 CBO campaign, 1 ad set, 1 ad with 25, or it should be $20 really, $20 to $50 a day budget. So like if you had 10 ads, then you would be having 10 campaigns, right? Each at $20 or whatever you're running it at, which would mean that you're going to spend $200, okay? Now, the other sort of method and this one I really like, this one has probably been the most productive in terms of ROAS and scalability as well. But the issue has been in the last few weeks, Facebook's been a bit wobbly, so hasn't been as effective, and the micro budget has actually been more effective in recent weeks, just because there's a little bit more control, lower budget, lower CPMs usually as well. But this one is 113, so 1 campaign, 1 ad, 1 ad set, 3 ads. So the way I'd structure this is if I have, my 9 ad example with 3 concepts and 3 hooks or variations per concept, each campaign would represent a concept, and all 3 ads would be the 3 variations of that concept, okay? So if I was doing 9 ads, I'd have 3 campaigns, and each campaign would have the 3 variations in, and set that to $100 to $300 a day. And I would have bid caps implemented on both of these as well, but I'm not going to go into that just yet. Okay. All right, so that those are the testing strategies, right? So the initial offer testing is I really try and aim for 3 to 5x payout. So going back to the payout being 150, so I'm promoting an offer that I get a payout of $150. Then my initial testing budget to test this offer is between 450 and 750. Okay. Now, again, it's not written in stone. Like if I see that there's hope, if there's glimmers of hope, if there's pockets of profit, then I'm going to maybe allow it a little bit more. Okay. Or if like after $300 has been spent and the CPMs are insane and like, I haven't had a single checkout and, there's something not right, then yeah, maybe I'm going to turn it off. Okay. Again, like I said, big believer in the, in offers, or I don't know if I did say that in this video, but I am a believer in offers showing themselves in the early signs of a campaign or early stages, meaning checkout should be good and ideally sales as well. Now, you've got to bear in mind that, if you're running low budget, it might take a few days to get a sale, okay? If your complete total budget is $20, $30 a day, then you have to think like most of these Nutra offers, these ClickBank VSL health offers, the supplements, they come in around, $90, maybe $100 CPAs on a good offer, okay? So if you're spending $20 a day, it might take you 3 or 4 days before you see a sale. So that's something else to sort of take into account. Lower spend means you're going to have to run longer, okay, to get that data. All right. So promoting an offer that pays out 150, allow initial testing budget 450 to 750. Now, at the end of that, if I'm above, if I'm below, it would be, I'm saying if over, I don't know how to sort of word that, what the best way, but if I'm below negative 20%, so my campaign is like minus 30% or minus 25% or more, then, and there's no signs of pockets of profit, and I've ran 9 ads and not one single ad is showing signs. Maybe I've got one profitable ad, but it's like plus 20%. Like at low scale, that's probably a dead sign, right? Like even it's, to scale that ad, it's just not going to hold, right? So at that point, I determine that this offer doesn't have legs, okay? And at this point, if we've only spent 450, and this could be, you could be a little bit more aggressive with this. And sometimes I will be more aggressive. And that is why nothing's set in stone. Like sometimes it's just completely dependable on how I feel. Completely dependable on like what my instinct is, right? I know maybe that's not the right way of doing things. Sometimes you should be like, oh, to the T, like, follow the SOP, the whatever, right? But sometimes I've got a gut feeling that this ain't going to work. So I'll turn it off. So, yeah, but like I do, well, in fact, I always allow a decent amount of spend, okay? Like I've never turned anything off, like, when it's under $100 in spend so far, because I know like it only takes another $10 of spend and we could have 3 sales rolling and then all of a sudden we're super profitable. But there's got to be a point where you're like, this ain't gonna work. Like, and this, like, when you're sort of testing out offers, this doesn't usually happen. Here we go off on a tangent, by the way. This doesn't usually happen when you're testing new offers, because one of the bigger issues or problems. And man, I did a video on this on my YouTube channel probably in 2020. I think it was September 2020. You should really look for it. Can't remember what it was called, but it was something to do with losing money, something in the hole, I think it was. But I got attached to an offer because the offer was performing really well. And so I tested it. It proved like it had legs. I scaled it to the degree of what I was scaling back then. That was like 4 years ago. So it was, maybe like $2,000 a day, probably nothing too heavy. But like, for me at the time, that was crazy. So scaled it, and then I think like a period of time came round and it just fell through the floor. For some reason, just dropped. But I was attached to the offer because I knew the offer was working. And at that point, I didn't have the experience that offers fatigue and offers die, and also seasonality. Like, end of summer, like people aren't really asked about the beach club. They're getting ready to gear up for winter, right? So September has never really been too much of a hot month for me for weight loss, and this was a weight loss offer that I was promoting back then. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but the yeah, one of the things is, although it shouldn't happen when you're testing new offers, there should be no attachment there or emotional attachment. When you do manage to scale an offer, it's very, very important not to become attached, because it's very easy to dump a lot of the profit that you've made in trying to bring back to life a dying campaign or offer. Okay, so that's a really important tip, and one that I've fallen trapped to at least once or twice in my past 4 years. Getting attached to an offer, super important. Anyway, tangent over. All right, so yeah, I mean, and by the way, like anything, if it was like negative 30% and I saw that there was 2 ads, I'd absolutely smoked it, done really well, but they just hadn't spent too much, and the rest of the ads had absolutely died a horrible death and hadn't, spent all the money, but they hadn't produced any results that would reflect in a negative ROAS, right? But there's pockets of profit there, then I'd be looking at it, right? And I'd be considering whether I, test this further. Okay. So that's a really important one as well. Like, pockets of profit is what I'm really looking for. I know not every ad's going to be profitable. That's just unrealistic. And I also know that, what I'm like, audiences, etc. If we're testing audiences at that stage, there's going to be different pockets of profit, and that's ultimately what I'm looking for. When you test an offer, it's very rare that you're going to be green the whole way through. You're going to find pockets of profit, and those pockets of profit could be dead obvious, right in front of your eyes. They could be, oh look, campaign, profitable. But then sometimes the pockets of profit may not be directly in front of your eyes. Sometimes they might be in a placement or a platform. Maybe Instagram's killing it, but Facebook is wasting all the money, right? Or maybe, a demographic within an age bracket or gender, right? A landing page could be, if you're testing multiple landers, which I recommend you do, then maybe one of the landing pages that you're testing is crushing it, but you haven't delved that deep. And when you do break it down, and that's not deep, by the way, but when you do break it down, it's like, oh my God, look at this landing page. It's like, I had all of the sales, and I've had 7 sales and testing this offer. Super profitable. It's only spent half of the budget, which is, let's say, $225, but it's made 7 sales. You get what I'm saying, right? So sometimes there's pockets of profit where it's like, shit, this combination of ad, audience, landing page, placement is absolutely crushing, right? And obviously we want to try and stay as broad as possible, because we don't want to narrow ourselves too much, because then we also see higher CPMs. But anyway, that's me, 20 minutes in, and we've barely even scratched the surface of this document. All right, so let's get through it. So what metrics am I looking for? So the main metric, along with ROAS, is that my EPC, my earning per click, is higher than my CPC. Ultimately, that is all you need to worry about. If only it was that simple, right? If only it was that simple. But in, really buttoned down and, simplified, that is what we're aiming for. We're aiming for our ads or campaign to have a higher EPC than our CPC. Earnings per click versus our cost per click, okay? Now, it's important to point out that your CPC, your cost per click, is a direct result of your CPM, which is cost per mille, which is cost per 1,000 impressions, divided by your CTR or link CTR, right? So the higher your CPM and or lower your CTR, the higher your CPC will be. So with that, most people think a super high CPM. I hate reading off a document, by the way. I feel like a right pleb. But most people think a super high CPM is a death sentence. And that's not entirely true, because sometimes your CPMs can be caused by a freaking whole range of things, right? Not only from, the ad content, the landing page content, keywords in your ad copy, keywords in your landing pages, your landing page load time, right? Which is why I really use Convertri, because it's super quick. And I know, and I'm not slating Go High Level, ClickFunnels, or anything else like that, because I've never timed their pages. But I've heard a lot of people say that their pages are bloated, the whatever. Again, like, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just, passing on third-hand information. But, that would make sense if your CPM was high and you're using Go High Level for landing pages, and you've like pretty much, troubleshot every other bottleneck or thing that it could be, and you just can't work out. You've tried a new page, a new domain, you've tried vanilla ad copy, you've tried really simple vanilla images, and still you're getting a high CPM. Well, it might be that your landing page is loading too slow. Okay, so there's a ton of different things that can, affect and impact your CPM. Time of year. So now we're going into Q4. We're in Q4. We had the elections, right? Now Q4 coming up, or Black Friday, Cyber Monday coming up. CPMs are still going to be high, like they always are this time of year. And you'll see as well, sometimes CPMs go up every end of quarter as well. So at the end of every 3 months, usually being March, June, September and December, right? We see a spike in CPM sometimes at the end, and we also sometimes see a little bit of wobbliness from Facebook as well, as they, try and make, I guess, the the board happy with their returns and whatever else they get paid off their dividends and whatever else. But yeah, CPMs can be affected. Now, the reason why I pointed that out is because although high CPMs can definitely be caused by that, and that's not great, sometimes they can actually be caused by you being your ads targeting a super high quality audience. So when you see the difference, and if you've ever ran Facebook ad campaigns before, you'll have seen a traffic campaign running to the exact same interest or lookalike or whatever it is can have a $10 CPM. And then you could have a conversion campaign optimized for purchases running to the exact same audience that you've got targeted in the traffic campaign, but the conversion campaign has a $50 CPM, 5x more than what the traffic campaign has. And ultimately, that's down to you trying to target a higher quality of audience, people likely to convert, okay, versus a traffic campaign where people are likely to click. Okay, so there's a massive difference. If you run a traffic campaign, you do well to get a buyer from your campaign, right? You'll get a ton of clicks at low cost, but they're going to be super unintentful, right? So that's a interesting sort of status to point out. So now on top of that, most advertisers think that a super high CTR is the best way around this. So my CPMs are high. So to offset that, I need to have a high CTR, which makes sense because the high CTR means you can lower your cost per click. Okay, so they think that's the best way around this, and that is not true. Okay, so high CTRs are great to reduce CPC, but often the high CTR, the high click-through rate, is a result of some kind of over clickbait style creative. And there's a really good example of this. I run ED quite a lot, or men's health in general, and for ED and male enhancement, we often use clips, graphics, whatever you want to call it, of attractive women, right? Because ED and male enhancement are both obviously around, a sexual nature. So using an attractive woman, it sort of makes sense. But what we see is we get 20% click-through rate on the ad, but super low conversion rate. Like there's no intent, right? The click is just a pure clickbait, curiosity click, wants to see a picture of a naked woman or something like that, right? And so there's no intent. They'll even click the landing page. So they will go through to the offer, but then they drop off on the offer. They're not really that interested. So like sometimes I'll see, 20% click-through rate, but like the conversion rate on the offer is like 0.2%, which is pretty shit. But sometimes it can work, right? Because if you've got low CPMs, super high CTR, and so then your CPC is like pennies. And even with a low conversion rate on the offer, sometimes that can work, especially if you're getting a high payout. Because even with that low conversion rate, it's there, right? You can still make the difference. Your EPC, again, going back to the beginning, we want the whole primary aim is to get a higher EPC than our CPC, right? That's it. Beat your CPC. Your EPC needs to be higher. Your earnings per click need to be higher than your cost per click. Okay. So like even with that, like if your cost per click is 5 cents, then obviously you want to try and get, EPCs of 10 cents, right? And that's doubling your money. Okay. Now it's not always as simple as that. And it doesn't always work out like that, unfortunately, but hopefully that makes sense. And that sort of leads us in here. So you could literally be targeting the US and get 5 cents cost per clicks, which are unheard of across many different markets, but your conversion rate is 0.5%. So it actually has a negative impact on your campaign. Okay, so again, but like going back to my previous example, like you can sometimes make it work. Like it is workable. The problem becomes scaling because you're already, even at low scale, with that lower conversion rate and those low cost per clicks, you're already running decent volume. You could spend, $500 and be getting thousands upon thousands upon thousands of clicks, right? For that $500, because you might be paying like a penny a click, right? So you need to be taking that into account, okay? All right. So also, as I touched on, CPMs and CTRs can also be impacted by what market you're targeting. So as in what offer you're promoting. I find weight loss and blood sugar CPMs, as an example, are much higher than nerve pain or toenail fungus. And I'll give you an example of this. Weight loss, outside of Q4 is probably around, between $40 to $60 would probably be where I'd be expecting to see a weight loss CPM. Blood sugar would probably be around the same, maybe a little bit higher, depending on what keywords are being used. Whereas nerve pain can still often be $20 to $30 CPM, and so can toenail fungus. And that could be targeting, and in fact, like I'm saying this right now, on paper, they look like the same demographic, right? Maybe you're targeting female, 40 plus, USA, broad, no interest, no lookalikes. So ultimately, you could have a weight loss ad targeting female 40 plus USA and a nerve pain ad, female 40 plus USA, but one has $60 CPMs, the other has $20 CPMs. Okay? This is why nothing's set in stone, right? This is exactly why you cannot have these are the these are the KPIs, and these are the metrics that we need to hit. Obviously, there's benchmarks, and I get that, but like, look, like if you're running different offers in different markets and different niches and different verticals, you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to adapt your metrics and what you're looking for, because sometimes you ain't gonna get $20 CPMs if you're running weight loss or blood sugar, right? You're running USA especially, right? Okay, so again, going back to the female 40 plus USA can be 2x in price difference when it comes to CPM. Again, boiling down to the audience you're targeting and the keywords in your ads and landing pages. Facebook's not daft, right? They can read your ad copy and landing page. In fact, that's how when you're targeting broad, that's how they can often find who you're looking for in your buyers, right? Because they're looking at your keywords in your ad copy and in your video script and in your landing page, and they're putting 2 and 2 together that this is a weight loss ad. It's looking for people looking to lose weight, so then they can go to their little bucket of people that have all engaged with weight loss ads in the past however many weeks, and then show them your ad, right? So that's where the high CPMs come from, because then that all automatically goes into a high competition bucket, right? Everyone's running weight loss. Again, just look at the top 10, 20 offers on ClickBank. How many are weight loss? Like, to be fair, I don't actually know, but I would guess at least 30% of the offers are weight loss, probably more than that. I bet there's a good 6 or 7 offers on there that are weight loss. The rest, maybe a couple of manifestation, dental, couple of ED, prostate, but majority weight loss. Okay, go on Spy Hero. What are the top offers being promoted right now on Facebook ads? Probably, top 10. I reckon 5 or 6 weight loss. Okay, so expect to pay a higher CPM if you're targeting weight loss. All right. So now, last thing before we look at metrics, because we haven't even got into metrics, so I apologize. But ultimately, the only real metrics that matter to me are EPC and ROAS. I mentioned that before. I could not care less if I'm paying $100 CPMs with a 2% click-through rate if that ad is bringing in an awesome EPC and ROAS. And sometimes that is very much realistic. And going back to that previous example of, if you've got a high CPM, it's not always because there's something wrong with your ad or your landing page or your domain. Sometimes you're just hitting a super high quality audience. And then that reflects with the low CTR because that high quality audience, these 2% that are clicking, they want to buy. Okay, they're buying, right? So then often you can have ads that look like this, but have insane conversion rate. And you better look after that ad if you find one of them, because I could not care less. If I can scale an ad that has these stats and these stats stay the same, which sometimes they don't, but if they do, and I've got a good conversion rate and a good EPC and it's, mega profitable, happy days. I'm happy with that. I think people get bogged down with trying to get the lowest cost in the ad, in the, the ad market, and that then takes away or has an effect on losing quality. Okay, if you're going for the lowest cost, expect to get the lowest quality. Okay, if you're having a super high click through, and I know sometimes that sort of counter, whatever the word is, I can't think what the word is, and I know in the past I've said, I'm going to put you onto a document that I made 4 years ago, which probably does whatever that word I'm looking for, counter. It's doing my head in that I can't think of it. Hopefully you know what I mean, but there's probably some, where I'm sort of going against what I'm saying here, but the game of media buying is forever evolving. Okay, if you think what worked 4 or 5 years ago works now, no. Okay, the concepts still remain the same, by the way, but like ad costs are a lot higher than they were, and actually I'll show you that in a second. But anyway, let's get on with it. So saying that, secondary metrics definitely carry. So obviously I'm talking about the real metrics, EPC and ROAS, but secondary metrics do obviously mean something. They are important, but carry a level of importance as a benchmark. And again, I've mentioned this already, to assess performance and spot bottlenecks. By that, I mean, if we see, the offer's converting, but with this high CPM, it's just not converting well enough. Okay. So how can we reduce that CPM, or how can we increase that conversion rate? Those are the two options, right? In that scenario. How do we reduce CPM, or how do we increase conversion rate? So that's the two options you have. Now, again, going back to the previous example, sometimes reducing CPM can often, or we won't say often, we'll say sometimes affect the quality, okay? Meaning conversion rate goes even lower. So you might be able to reduce the CPM, but in doing so, you might also reduce the offer conversion rate. So then how do you increase the offer conversion rate? Well, in my opinion, you need to get a little bit more down and dirty with what's working in your ad copy and really find the messaging that's really pulling that high intent, okay? That high intent customer that you're looking for, because there will be some of those, because often we're looking at a blended metric. Again, why they're not set in stone, we're looking at things like as an average, as an overview. Okay, this is my campaign. I have 10 ads running in it, and this is my overall CPM and my overall CTR, okay? If we're looking at that sort of bird's eye view, then obviously, again, going into our pockets of profit, we can often find ads that do fit our benchmarks or whatever we're looking for, right? So, going back to it without trying to be too confusing, the CPMs, the CTRs, everything else is definitely important. But for me, it's a secondary metric. and it's used to assess performance and spot bottlenecks. Like I said before, if I have, a $100 CPM, it doesn't fit my benchmark, doesn't fit the metric, my 2% CTR doesn't fit the metric, but if the ad's profitable, I don't give a shit, right? So we have to think of that as well, right? So yeah, it's important. Okay, so in saying that, secondary metrics, blah, blah, blah. So let's talk about what average metrics I aim for. So finally, after 35 minutes, we get to the part that this video was all about. And yeah, it's not really anything special, to be fair. So that's why I gave all this fluff, which hopefully delivered some value. Okay, so ads metrics. Obviously, this is up there. So I'm going to move that down a bit so it's not as wonky. So my CPM, benchmark $30 to $50 is what I'd ideally like to see when we're testing low budgets and initial offer testing. Okay, CTR on the link, so link clicks, 3 to 5%. Again, anything lower, despite, unless we found this unicorn ad, is usually going to be, after X amount spent, going to be cut. And anything over 5% gets into that territory of clickbait. And maybe 5 to 10% is usually okay. But I definitely see the intent level sometimes drop. And then anything over 10%, 15% especially, I really see a low intent. And it's just then more of a clickbait click. So it's important to know that, in my opinion, okay, and in my experience. I'm only going through off my experience. I'm sure there's people that have 15% click-through rates that absolutely crush. And that, by the way, would be amazing for a lead gen offer if there's no friction of having to whip out a credit card, watch an hour-long VSL or whatever it is, right? A lead gen offer with a 15% CTR might be exactly what you're looking for. But, whatever, we're not talking about that. Okay, so cost per click, again, remember the cost per click is directly a result of the CPM and link CTR. So, if you want to change your cost per click, you need to either higher this or lower that, okay? But ideally, my cost per click, usually for most offers, needs to be between 30 cents and $1 to make work. And obviously with those, offers that convert lower, I need to be more towards 30 cents here, okay? And then I've put in my video hook rates as my, probably semi-secondary metrics. 3-second views, I want to ideally be 20%. So this is the hook rate of the video. And then the hold rate, so people that then go on to watch 15 seconds is 40%, okay? All right, landing page metrics. So my LPCTR, my landing page click-through rate, wants to be 30 to 50%. And the reason why it's such a big spread is because this could be quizzes, this could be advertorials, this could be splash pages. Now, a splash page is going to have a much higher CTR than a quiz. Okay, so again, nothing written in stone. There's so many different factors to take in. You couldn't have just an overall metric. So my metric is 30 to 50%. And it's very much specific to what page I'm running. So if I've got a quiz, 30% is good. 40% is great. If I've got an advertorial, probably around the same, but maybe 35 to 45% is where I want to be. A splash page is probably going to be 40 to 50% realistically, okay? And the cost per landing page click should be coming in around $1 to $1.50. Again, that's going to be completely dependent on your cost per click, okay? That could be $2. If you're paying $1 cost per click with a 50% landing page click-through rate, then obviously that's going to be $2 for a landing page click, okay? Or cost per landing page click, as in the click on the lander. So ultimately, the cost per hop or the cost per offer visitor, okay, is what we're looking at there. Okay, then my earnings per landing page click is, written there. And again, it's usually going to be 1.5 to 2x my EPC. So my EPC, my earnings per click, is the overall earnings per click here on the ad, okay? And then usually my, again, depending on the percentage click through, that's going to determine what my earning per landing page click is. But I thought I'd put that metric there as well because it's quite a good one to look at to really gauge performance of landing pages. I am pretty much always running at least 2 landing pages in a campaign. They could be advertorial versus splash. They could be quiz versus advertorial. They could be 2 splash pages, but with 2 different headlines, with 2 different hero images, whatever it is, right? The one thing I do is I test one thing at a time. So if I'm testing splash versus advertorial, that's the test, okay? Then if I determine splash is outperforming, I might then test splash headline 1 versus splash headline 2. And then headline 2 wins, splash headline 2 versus splash headline 3. Headline 2 wins again, splash headline 2, hero image 1 versus splash headline 2, hero image 2. So I might then test hero images. I'm testing one thing at a time, okay? I'm not testing 7 different things or 7 different landing pages. I'm testing 2 landing pages at a time, and I'm testing one differentiating thing per test, okay? All right, and then offer metrics, checkout or order form impression, I've seen usually needs to be 25% plus, and then offer conversion rate needs, especially in this sort of stage of where we're at, this is probably a little bit more relevant to Q4, 1.2% offer conversion rate. Now, in the rest of the year, especially Q1, as we see a reduction in CPM and we see weight loss really take off, as well as other niches, 1%, 1% offer conversion rate is probably where I want to be. Or, I want to be higher than that, but that would be where my metric would be. So again, nothing's written in stone. Seasonality can change it as well, right? Time of the year. Okay, campaign metrics, EPCs, I want to be over $1. Again, subject to my cost per click. If I'm paying $1.10, then I don't want to be $1. I want to be over $1.10, right? So again, going back to my, earlier, whatever that's called, my EPC needs to be higher than my CPC. End of. Full stop. Game over. Okay. My ROAS, I operate at 20% plus. But again, this is subject to the level of scale. If I'm scaling, 20% is amazing. If I'm spending 10K a day at 20% ROAS, then happy days. I'm happy with that. Whereas, if I'm spending $100 a day at 20% ROAS, then that's a different story, right? Now, obviously, at that lower level of spend, I'm probably testing the offer. So there's pockets of profit, which I can then fish out to then scale, okay? All right, so then let's just take one last look at this troubleshooting bottlenecks before wrapping up. So I had this document that I made in 2020. And you're best off ignoring this because things have changed, okay? Still relevant to a degree, but CPMs are higher than what they were back then. We're looking at, but I do also explain that. And this was when I think I was more heavy in the lead gen space as well, by the way. So this was probably early 2020. But I detail why, right? CTRs. So yeah, it's funny looking back at this and seeing the metrics. All right, so analyzing bottlenecks, the CPM's high, do we need to change conversion rate, blah, blah, blah. So there's all of these things, analyzing bottlenecks, okay? I wanted to leave this for you because I think there could be some value in this, even though it's for nearly 5 years old, okay? And there's also a Loom video. If you want to check out the Loom video, it's there. This was a video that I recorded, and you'll tell how tinny it is. So it's probably just recorded on my laptop audio microphone. Not that it's got any better, to be fair, but yeah, I think there's value in this. Again, don't be like, well, you said in this video, but like, yeah, this was 5 years ago, right? So again, it's changed. Just know that, okay? Understand that what's on this document and what's in this video is maybe not as relevant in terms of metrics and troubleshooting, but what I think is relevant is the concept and the idea behind it, okay? So again, I go through in this video, I think I go through like a Windows lead gen campaign, and I'm comparing CPMs. I'm trying to find how we sort of troubleshoot and, the bottlenecks. So it's worth a watch, and I'd love some feedback, because if there's good feedback on the video, then I'll start, like I've got a library of, old videos that I did years ago, or over the last few years actually. And if it's worth me going through and digging some ones up that I think are relevant, and putting into a classroom, I'll do that, because again, although it's not super relevant to today, I can guarantee there'll be some golden nuggets in there. So if anyone wants to see that, let me know, and I'll definitely make some time to go through and put them together. All right, guys. Any questions? Let me know.